As you mentioned about these countries, I watched the analytics after the summit, what said what, and South Africa representatives were free in critical rhetoric towards the developed countries, and their obligations, they say that they're not being fulfilled for the developing countries. But are they honestly talking this way and waiting for fulfillment of the obligations from Russia? Because all that this aggression states, as Russia says or does, it's always turning to lie. So do the representatives of these countries like South Africa really believe in all the promises that Russia gives to their countries or their governments? Or they just see their own private interests and not thinking about their societies at all, as it used to be before?
I think it's a great question. I would imagine that there's quite a lot of variation among the different governments concerned. I have somewhat more familiarity with, or have followed more closely, the debates within Latin American countries about their position on the Russian invasion. And my sense is that it's a combination of both of the points that you raised. So to some degree, we have to acknowledge that there are a lot of grievances against Western governments, including the United States, that have nothing to do with Ukraine or its conflict with Russia. My view of the matter is that if your country has a history of being invaded, that's a reason to empathize with Ukraine and to support Ukraine. It's not a reason to support the invader. To some extent, though, there may be a second dimension, which is purely diplomatic realpolitik, that Russia is seen as a useful counterweight, and as a result, there is a kind of reluctance to abandon it or to distance themselves from it, or even to criticize it very strongly. I think it's an open question, and maybe this is something that your question points to that should be explored further, the extent to which it's possible to influence public opinion in the countries concerned, right? So whether there are ways that Ukraine or Ukraine supporters could bring to, say, the people of Brazil, the people of Latin America, the people of South Africa, the people of India, the facts as we understand them, and the implication that they, as citizens of countries that aspire to a more just world and have some possibly legitimate criticisms of the way the world is governed, have to see Ukraine as a victim of imperialism, something that should be a country that should be protected against imperialism, if there's to be a better world for any of us. So that is how I think it could be presented to those people, the peoples of those countries. I have wondered whether enough has been done by Western governments to try to influence opinion in global South countries, or particularly in BRICS countries, the ones that we can reach, not including China, which of course is itself a very closed authoritarian state. My impression is that what has been done mainly is diplomatic maneuvering behind the scenes to influence the behavior of those governments. There's nothing wrong with that, but I do think there is some reason to think that more should be done to make the case for Ukraine to the people of, say, Brazil, South Africa, India, and other parts of the global South.
To resume our discussion, the future of the United Nations and such organization that we awaited would be served for the peace, but what we see from their decisions, they cannot do the job that they were intended to do. And since the beginning of war, and I remind this is the 2014 in Ukraine, it's been 9 years of war already. But till that time, the United Nations continues to give the floor to Russia, to listen to the open lies of the representatives of their politicians, and all the presenters in this hall know that this is this lie. They openly say, and the representatives of the United States and different other countries say this is a lie, but they still listen to Russian Federation. More of this. They still didn't find how to deprive Russia of the rights of veto. I'm not telling about getting away Russia from the United Nations as a country, but to do some radical decisions. So taking in account all of this, how do you think this organization like United Nations will have a destiny, will have to have a destiny like League of Nations after the First World War, because it's weak. It's just people and the building, and no power, no influence. So it has to be reconstructed, or it has to be eliminated and build up from the very beginning.
Yeah, that's a great question. I wish I knew the answer. I actually, like you, see some parallels with the situation the world faced in the 1930s, in that the institutions that are supposed to guarantee world peace are simply not working and apparently can't work. It would be different if Russia and to some degree China were not embarked in the course of aggression, and in the case of China, genocide against the Uyghur people that they have embarked on. But we are where we are, and I don't know where that leaves us in terms of the future of these international institutions. I suppose the only bright spot that's worth mentioning, and that probably should be more widely known, is that the United Nations Charter and related documents and principles of international law clearly give Ukraine the right to engage in self-defense. But in fact, that's not how international law sees the situation. In particular, the United Nations as an institution, it clearly gives Ukraine the right to defend itself, and other countries the right to provide Ukraine with the assistance that it requests to defend itself. So I mention this in part because I think it is relevant to the question you asked about the future of the UN. So to the extent that the UN as an institution is not capable of restraining Russia, as appears to be the case, what we're left with is the right of individual UN members, and certainly I would argue their moral obligation, if not legal obligation, to support Ukraine in any ways they can to defend itself against Russia's war of aggression.